how red meat got demonized is one of the most fascinating things in human history. And you need to know a bit about human history to discover how we got here. For context, this is exactly what I studied when I was in college. I went to UC Santa Cruz. I got my degree in anthropology with a big focus in medical anthropology. So this is my domain. Homo sapiens, your ancestors, have been around for about 300,000 years. Before that, we had different ancestors, Homo erectus, Homo habilis. There was actually a few. They for sure ate red meat. And when I talk about ancestral diets, many people like to say, oh, well, my grandpa was a vegetarian or something like that. That is not what I'm referring to when I talk about ancestral dieting. I'm talking about your ancestors 8,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago. They were eating red meat. Now, how much? It's up in the air. For many different societies, it was different amounts. It was hard to come by. But what is for sure, what isn't disputed, is it was one of the most, and it still is today, one of the most prized, sought after foods ever because of its nutritional value. Now, we're in an area today where many people say to avoid red meat because of heart disease, colon cancer. I'm going to dive into those issues, and we're going to see if that's real. However, we need to establish some facts. Number one, in this age of autoimmunity, with so many people being allergic to many foods, red meat is one of the foods that the least amount of people are allergic to. It is a very absorbable food. So I can't entertain this ideology that red meat isn't absorbed or we didn't evolve to eat red meat. It's, maybe for a whole other podcast, I can dive into how we did evolve to eat red meat with our canine structure, our guts being very acidic, and just the simple fact that your ancestors ate red meat. The first thing we're going to look at is this idea that if you eat red meat, it's going to clog your arteries, basically. You're going to get heart disease if you eat too much red meat. How did that start? The main way this started was from survey-based studies. There was this big study of 500,000 people where they surveyed them. They say, do you eat red meat? And then from that group of people, and now who knows what type of red meat they ate. We're talking, this could be somebody who eats McDonald's twice a week. This could be somebody who eats, old processed meat and never works out. They didn't factor in many different things that are critical aspects of human health, and they didn't differentiate between somebody who eats unprocessed meat and somebody who eats processed meat. And what they do with those survey-based studies is they say, hey, this group that ate meat had higher levels of heart disease. So then red meat causes heart disease. That is complete bullshit, and I'll show you some studies to the contrary. When we look at this meta-analysis from 2010, it's popping up right here, you can see what they were trying to find is the association between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. This is because what people say is red meat contains saturated fat, and if you eat too much saturated fat, you are going to clog your arteries and die. It turns out there is a lot of dispute on that topic. I'm not somebody who believes you should eat tons and tons and tons of saturated fat because, yes, there is some evidence that having too much saturated fat can be bad. However, what they found in this study is the following. They found there is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with an increased risk of coronary heart disease or cardiovascular disease. And this isn't the only study out there questioning this link between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. What many top cardiologists are now thinking is the following, that heart disease is complex. There are many different factors at play. It is not as simple as, oh, if your cholesterol is a bit high, you are going to get heart disease. And there are studies to show that there are people that have low cholesterol that get heart disease. There are people that go their whole lives with high cholesterol and never get heart disease. Am I somebody who thinks you should just have your cholesterol levels as high as possible? No, but eliminating red meat to lower your cholesterol levels and thus lower your risk of cardiovascular disease is not a logical conclusion, especially when you are completely ignoring some of the benefits of red meat. Red meat is one of the most nutrient-dense sources of protein that we can get. It has many nutrients that actually support heart health and support cardiovascular function. And we know there's nobody who disagrees with the fact that protein is important. Yet in the mainstream Western ideology, we say, yes, protein is very important, nutrients are very important, but when protein and nutrients are packaged in this scary thing called red meat, you should avoid it. It's a very, very illogical conclusion. And a lot of these studies that look at processed red meat, which are like salami, your pastrami, all that, do show some issues with processed red meat. And I completely agree with that. Having read those studies, I don't think including a bunch of processed red meat into your diet is a good idea. However, much of that research is we're going to find it's because of the preservatives and the other aspects that come with eating processed red meat. If you survey people who eat processed red meat, where are they getting that from? Fast food. They're not getting it from good sources. So You need to understand how these studies are done because there is no mechanistic action through anybody that shows, oh, this person ate red meat and it clogged their arteries and they died. That is not what is going on. So you need to get past that. And now we're going to look at colon cancer. You have seen many big headlines hit that say eating red meat increases your risk of colon cancer. And it's persuaded a lot of people to just completely give up red meat because they say, well, I don't want to get colon cancer, so I'll get my protein from other sources such as chicken and fish, or maybe go plant-based. However, many people just don't see the research that shows that it's actually not connected with colon cancer. Here's some for you right here. From 2007, eating red meat will not increase colorectal cancer risk, study suggests. The reason you're not shown studies like this is because they don't really make a good headline. Many people in the United States do eat red meat. It's a topic of concern. So publishing a big headline and doing a big media push on how red meat causes colon cancer will simply get way more attention than a video like this will, which says, yeah, you're probably not going to get colon cancer by eating red meat. Also, when we look at the history of where human beings, Homo sapiens, came from, if red meat really caused cancer, we wouldn't have made it this far, with it being one of the most sought after foods ever. Now, I am not somebody who thinks that the carnivore diet is optimal or you should just eat red meat. From the totality of the evidence, it looks like we are omnivores. And many anthropologists would agree with this. We are designed to eat and be able to eat many different types of diets, many different types of foods. And it appears there are beneficial aspects of many different food groups. I'm a huge fan of getting enough fiber. I'm a huge fan of getting enough nutrients from plants and fruits. But ignoring red meat or pushing it out of your diet because you are worried about cardiovascular disease or colon cancer risk is dumb. There's also another thing I'm going to address right here, which is some people say red meat is not digestible. This is simply false. Your stomach pH is acidic, and it really appears like it's designed to eat animal proteins, is what I'll say. That's my personal opinion. With an acidic pH of the stomach, which has evolved over millions of years because we started out eating raw animals, and we started out scavenging animals that had already been killed by lions. We'd find these animals, these carcasses, and we would eat the remnants of that. We would eat bone marrow. There's evidence of butchery of bone marrow 55,000 years ago. It's one of the first foods human beings ate and survived off and thrived off of. And then we started to invent stuff like spears, hunting methods, and we began to kill larger game and eat that food. This has led to our stomachs being very acidic because we were exposed to many different pathogens through just, dirty conditions. We were exposed to many different types of foods that we would need to experiment with eating. And that is a big aspect. Now, what happens to many people is they try out a low-fat or plant-based diet, and your body adapts and it starts making less stomach acid, less bile, less digestive enzymes. So if you've unfortunately tried that, you may have to add in some digestive enzymes just to get back to baseline to where you are, to, in a more similar manner to your carnivore ancestors. That is something I think is going on with a lot of people that say, oh, when I eat meat, it's hard to digest, because I digest meat like a beast. I can eat some meat and 2 hours later hit a very, very hard workout, and I don't get indigestion because my body is just very accustomed to eating this extremely nutrient-dense source of protein. The simple truth is you are going to continue being pushed this narrative that red meat is bad, and a lot of this is coming out of companies that make meat alternatives. I've spoken about how the Stanford Plant-Based Diet Initiative accepted funding from Beyond Beef. If that doesn't scream, that there's a serious issue right there for you, then I don't know what to tell you. Obviously, what conclusions do you think the Stanford Plant-Based Diet Initiative is going to find, especially when their money comes from somebody who makes a meat alternative? Are they going to find that eating grass-fed steak is good for you? No. There's no way they're going to find that. They'd get their funding pulled. It's just not what the Stanford Plant-Based Diet Initiative is going to find. I mean, come on. There's a huge, huge, huge monetary value in convincing you that this food that we've evolved with forever as human beings is bad, and you should eat something else. And the reason there's so much money in this is because we have a natural craving for red meat through evolution. There is certain things that are just wired into our brain. We're talking movement, we're talking sunlight, we're talking, sitting by a fire. These things, for better or for worse, are so deeply ingrained into our body, and I believe eating animal protein is one of those things. We've even seen studies showing that people who go vegan dream about meat, that they still crave meat. And they've done imaging on people's brains, and they've done lie detector tests and all this stuff. And a lot of vegans actually end up eating meat when they get drunk, because maybe you release some of those inhibitions and you go back to what you naturally crave. which is meat. So listen, there's no reason to eliminate this extremely nutrient-dense source of protein from your diet. If you want to eat less saturated fat, that's okay, and that can still be done while you eat red meat. You can get leaner cuts. Me personally, I've looked into all the data on cardiovascular disease and heart disease, and it's definitely still up in the air. I am not somebody, again, who thinks that you should try to raise your cholesterol as much as possible or just eat a stick of butter every day. I'm not that guy. However, avoiding fattier cuts of meat, like avoiding buying a ribeye, in my opinion, is dumb. And why I think it's dumb is because there's many different aspects of heart disease at play before you just drop dead of a heart attack. It's not as simple as an extremely healthy person like myself who has low triglycerides, has their blood sugar in check, has low C-reactive protein, has good high cholesterol, like the good healthy levels of HDL, okay? So my cholesterol is not skyrocketing high. It might be a little high if you're a traditional cardiologist, but I feel great. My actual cardiovascular health is very good. I can get on an assault bike. I can go mountain biking. I can go surf. I can do 8-10 rounds of jiu-jitsu. My actual heart is healthy. So in my opinion, avoid the heavily processed sugar, the heavily processed foods, buy plenty of unprocessed good cuts of red meat, eat that, eat fruits, eat vegetables, eat grains if you want. I like enjoying some white rice. I like potatoes for, good source of carbohydrates. Eat a variety of foods, including red meat. Let me know what you guys think. I wanted to make this video because I get hit up so often by people saying, hey, my mom thinks red meat is bad, or my dad said red meat causes colon cancer. You can show them this video and get their opinions on it and go buy some steak. That is it for this episode. Let me know any other topics that you want me to dive into in regards to health, wellness, anything pretty much, and I'll be back next week.